want to say I miss Henrietta's flowers and all your all's food that we would normally be having together.
Right.
Can't share food on Zoom.
But it looks like Diana brought some Northern Lights.
Right.
Tony,
Yes.
if people click on speaker view, then you bring whoever's speaking right up. You go up to the upper right corner and click on speaker view.
Right.
Oh, I see. Okay. There we go. All right. I'm going to get in Lauren here and Fred.
And people are already writing to the chat, so don't be afraid to take a look at the chat if you haven't done that. So how about at 2:05? So another minute and we'll start. And lots of people, I swear, every few seconds, like 5 more people are coming on, so, which is great. But Pam will be monitoring and letting people in as we keep going. So people coming in later, just don't want us to get too behind.
Actually, I think I need to be authorized to do that. I don't see the waiting room.
I'm doing the waiting room right now.
I mean, if you want to keep up with that.
Yeah, I'm doing my best.
Oh, so you're not going to watch it? Oh, but it's going to take a while. Good. I'll bring the lunch.
Oh, you're giving up just because it was started in 1 minute.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I'll start.
Yeah. Oh, well, you can use one chop if you want, but I guess it would take you. So it's now 2:05. I think we start, and I'm sure some other people will keep coming on and joining us, and we'll take care of that. So first off, just to let people know, to make things easier, we have a large and wonderful crew. To please mute yourself when others are speaking or presenting, and please use the raise hand feature if you wish to speak at some point after someone else is presented or during a time for comments, just so that we can keep things quiet enough with background noise. And the chat, as I said, is always available for written comments as the meeting is going on. So welcome to everyone who's here so far. We've got 72 people here already. And I want to especially welcome our candidates. So I'm just checking to see if everyone is on. John Lon, are you here?
Yes.
Great. And Allison, are you here yet, Allison?
Yes, I was here early.
Okay, great. And Steve Owens, are you here?
Yep, I'm right here.
Great. And Mark, are you here?
Yes.
All right. And David Ciccarelli, did you make it?
I did, thank you.
Did, fantastic. All the way from Mozambique.
Yes.
So welcome to everyone, especially our candidates. And before we go on, I just want to give a special shout out to our working group, Watertown Citizens for Black Lives, on the amazing vigil that they organized with some other help, but it was just an amazing accomplishment and very meaningful to so many people. And the regular Tuesday vigils are going to continue, so there'll be another one this Tuesday. And you can find all that information on the website, on their Facebook page, our Facebook page. I also just wanted to mention that our monthly meeting next month, because we decided to not have an additional meeting besides this one this month, even though we usually meet on the 3rd Wednesday of every month. But in July, on the July 18th meeting, we're going to have a focus on Hiroshima and Nagasaki's 75th anniversary of the bombing. And as many of you probably know, we have a always very special and poignant commemoration down the river, a vigil beforehand in the square, and then crossing, lighting candle boats, gathering, having music, speaking. So we're going to have a special focus on that on the July meeting. But in the meantime, this Wednesday at 7 p.m., we are having a Zoom meeting just to have anyone who would like to help participate in the planning for this August commemoration, which is going to be a challenge. How we figure out what to do in person on the river, it's socially distant. There's all kinds of local, national and international activities going on. And as members of Mass Peace Action, and there's all kinds of fantastic ideas coming up. So we'd love to invite our whole community to join us in thinking through and talking about what are the different ideas we have about how to make it work, both locally and activities we could join virtually around the world, actually. So as I said, that's this Wednesday at 7. The link is on our website. And I think just moving on, I think let's just take a quick look at reviewing our agenda for this meeting. I don't know, I can try again to share it, but if someone else is able to, I've been having a terrible time with my Zoom on my computer, but I will try. Let's see if I can make this happen. So Tony, you have the screen sharing disabled apparently.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Oh,
Joseph had a suggestion to just post it in the chat. That might also work if it's easier. Thank you, Joseph, for that great idea.
I can try, though I've also been finding it complicated not having the chat working.
I thought I undid that. Can someone tell me what?
So Ellen, would you like me to put it in the chat?
Sure, if you could do that, that'd be great. In the meantime, I'll just talk it through for people. So coming up next will be our annual election and also an acknowledgement because Abby is stepping down. She's been serving for a while, so we have a special acknowledgement for Abby. And then we'll have our annual election of officers. After that will be brief, very brief, like 2 to 3 minute max reports from each of our working groups to fill you in on recent activities. After that, Tony's going to make a special announcement, and then we will begin our candidates forum. And in terms of how the forum, just so you'll know how that works, we have a representative from each of our working groups who have come up with questions for the candidates. They've had a chance to look at those. And I'll call on each of those representatives to ask one question at a time to each of those people. There'll be 2 questions total for starters. And I'll sort of rotate that around a bit, the order of speakers. And then if there's time, which I would like to make happen, there's a 3rd question that each of the working groups has come up with. And then additionally, I'm hoping we can be really tight enough.
Want me to tell you how to do it?
What are you asking me about, Abby? Anyway, and then after those questions, assuming we will have time, we'll open it up for anyone else who would like to ask their own question that's not been generated by the working groups. And then we'll end with a brief evaluation, a chance for you to put something into the chat about how you felt this meeting went. So there we are. And so I would like to move on to Abby. Abby, I think you're muted because I see your mouth moving, but I don't hear you.
I'm here, Sue Ellen.
Okay, great. So Abby, as I mentioned, has decided to step down from the Watertown Citizens Steering Committee, and she first joined the steering committee about 7 years ago, right around the same time that we changed our name from Watertown Citizens for Environmental Safety to Watertown Citizens for Peace, Justice, and the Environment. And Abby has been a significant force. She reminds us of the indisputable relationship between peace, justice, and the environment. And before she was elected, Abby was proposing and helping organize all kinds of events and film showings. We had at that time a Peace and Justice Task Force, of which she contributed and recommended all kinds of, very evocative presentations and brilliant guest speakers focusing on the Middle East. And she has tremendous organizational development expertise, which is her forte and her profession. And we have benefited from that tremendously over these years. And Abby, I know you're not going to desert us. You promised that you would stay participating and you won't be a stranger going forward and continue to offer us advice. But we are so grateful for your guidance, your leadership, and all the inspiration you've given us over all these years. So please accept for the moment, there is a virtual gift that will be delivered to you. I was hoping I could sort of post a copy of it, and a copy of the card that's coming to you, but I'm not sure that's going to work. So I'll just let you know that I will deliver this to you when the meeting is over. And thank you so much for everything. And let's give a shout out and a clap to Abby, and thanks to Abby.
Thank you for that lovely acknowledgement. Thank you. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere.
Great. So now we're just going to move on to our annual election of our steering committee and the officers. And at the bottom of the agenda, I don't know if you can see it in the chat, is the list of nominees, people who are interested in running for this year's steering committee. And I can just tell you, it's the current steering committee plus Arun Sanuti, who is running to fill Abby's slot, the open slot we have in the steering committee. So it's myself, Deborah Peterson, who's secretary. I'm continuing to consider being president. Jean Trubeck, who is our treasurer. Nicole Gardner, Jackie Gross, Tony Palumba, Pam Phillips, and Ron Weber. And as I mentioned, Arun is hoping to join us. So we have 9 people running, we have 9 slots, and here's our chance to just show, and I think we can just do it. You don't need necessarily to electronically raise your hand, but so I'm just ask people, you can just hold your hands up, assuming that you agree and willing to elect that slate of officers and members of the steering committee for the coming year. Looks good to me. Thank you all, and congratulations to everyone, and welcome Arun. If you are with us, I can't see the whole list, but I hope you are here, and we look forward to another year of wonderful activities and inspiration. So moving right along to our reports from each of our steering committees, each of our working groups. And believe it or not, we are a little bit ahead of schedule, which is great. So first off is Friends of Bees group, and Pam Phillips is going to give us a brief report.
So, so Friends of Bees, we basically are here to advocate for bees and other pollinators. And towards the end of 2019, we started working towards getting Watertown to become a bee city. We've been working with the Town Conservation Committee, and Jamie O'Connell is joining us, and she has also been our liaison to help make sure that this process goes forward. And we're doing our usual events. I have a bee talk now that shows off what our local bees look like. And I'll be presenting that during Pollinator Week via the Mount Auburn Cemetery website. And we're also going to do a little bee safari through my backyard the next day. And so this is going to be on June 23rd and June 24th. So when I've got the links, I'll be posting that. And that's the sort of things that we do.
Fabulous. I love the term, just a bee safari. That's wonderful.
I've got so many things flowering. I wish I could do it right now. It's really exciting out there.
Yeah.
It's Nicole interrupting for one quick second. I don't think I may have missed it, Pam, but I don't think you mentioned that you have a group on Facebook. So if people who are on this call and are interested in in environmental preservation and bees in particular, it's a great group to join.
Yeah, all of the working groups also have a group on Facebook. Yeah. And if you just go to the Watertown Citizens page, I believe there's links to all the groups. But if you're having trouble, you can also just send an email to friendsofbees@watertowncitizens.org, and that will come to me, and I can put you in the mailing list or whatever groups you want to join us.
Great. Thanks, Nicole. Next, Ellen Rothman is going to give us a brief report on Watertown Faces Climate Change Working Group. Ellen, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great.
I'm just unmuting myself.
You are unmuted. We hear you.
Okay. So I'm Ellen Rothman, and I'm a member of Watertown Faces Climate Change, which is both a working group of Watertown citizens and a node or chapter of 350 Mass, which is a statewide network dedicated to confronting the climate crisis. And yes, it's true, there was a coronavirus-related drop in emissions, peaking at 17% in early April. But sadly, scientists estimate that carbon dioxide levels now are the highest they've been in all of human history. So the amount of greenhouse gases actually in the air just hit a record high, with the highest monthly average value ever recorded in May while we were all locked down. Climate change is not on pause in any way, shape, or form, although many other things are, as we all know. WFCC was formed in early 2017 to strategize about what Watertown can do to combat this crisis and fight for better policies at the local and state levels. Our goals are to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and waste, address environmental health issues, and improve our energy infrastructure. We work with 350 Mass on statewide legislative priorities, and we join in strikes and actions. Locally, we have concentrated our efforts on a couple of things, which I'll tell you quickly. The first is Watertown Solar Ordinance, which I hope you all know about. It's the first in the state. We're real path breakers here. It requires new commercial construction, as well as renovations of existing buildings that are more than 10,000 square feet to use solar energy. Then, and that, rather than sitting on our laurels, we moved on to become very fierce advocates with the school building committee, which has been very sympathetic to this, to have the new elementary schools be zero net energy, which means they'll be entirely powered by solar panels, and Watertown will own that, which means if there's anything extra, it'll go to other schools, other town buildings. These will be the very first ZNE schools built in the Commonwealth. Another bit of path breaking from Watertown. Then there's community choice aggregation, which I hope you're all familiar with. We help develop and promote a plan that reduces our use of energy from fossil fuels by allowing Watertown residents to purchase their electricity that comes from a higher percentage of renewable sources at the same, or in fact, a lower price than they pay when buying it from Eversource. This is an ongoing program you can still take advantage of, and if you want information about all this, and in fact about all of our events, you should go to the Citizens webpage, which is where we live. Transportation, it's now the largest contributor to greenhouse gases, and we're looking to join other local organizations to identify opportunities for the town to move toward a less car-dependent post-pandemic future. We meet every Sunday at 4:15, right now via Zoom. Anyone is welcome. I can't say we have great food to offer, especially on Zoom, but we'd be happy to have you, and you can get the call-in link We don't post it to avoid Zoom bombs, but you can easily get it if you send an email to Ann Munson, MUNSON 30@gmail.com.
60. That's
Oh, 60. Thank you, Tony. I have it's right in front of me, but 60. She's not 30. Okay. Ann Munson 60@gmail.com.
All right, thank you, Ellen. That's great. And next we'll hear from Yola Hanna from our refugee support group. Yola, you there? You need to unmute yourself. Yola, Tony, can you unmute Yola?
Yep, I will right now. Oh,
Yola, oh, she's still showing muted.
hang on. There she is.
Hi, my name is Yula Hanna, and I'm part of the refugee support group. And as of late spring, our group has been working with 80 refugees and asylum seekers from around Boston area, as close as Watertown, and as far as Lowell and Worcester. Our members have been raising money, helping family find housing, collect used furniture, clothing, computers, household goods, collect those and deliver them at the same time. Help people get oriented and enrolled in schools, and taking families to medical appointments, taking them food shopping, or clothing for children and parents. And for we meet once a month, and we discuss what we did, what we achieved during this month, and what we need to do for the future. And we were planning on having a film screening and photo exhibit this spring, but unfortunately, they've been on hold because of the coronavirus. We couldn't do them. So now we're focusing more on our immigrant families, especially a lot of them now don't have work. Many of them are undocumented or asylum seekers, and they don't get any money from the government. So their situation is really bad now. So we're hoping if anyone would like to donate part of their the money that they got from the government, their economic stimulus, or all of it, to donate it to Watertown Citizens. Send the information watertowncitizen@gmail.com, and the group will definitely give them to the right people, the deserving people. So that's what we've been doing so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Yola.
Thank you.
It is a tough time for those families. It's been heartbreaking, and glad we've been doing what we can to help them, and hopefully before long we'll get back to having educational events and other kinds of things that we love to do, and we're obviously still involved with legislative events as well. Next, Watertown Citizens for Black Lives. Joseph, report from Joseph Rotella.
Yes. Hi there, Sue Ellen. Thank you, and thank you, everyone. My name is Joseph Rotella. It should be no surprise that in light of recent events, our working group, Watertown Citizens for Black Lives, has been highly active. Our monthly vigils, which we do summer, spring, summer, and fall, we're usually getting between 5 and 25 folks who showed up. We were joined by over 500 this last week. It was a beautiful silent vigil that seeing so many folks come out and show support. It was absolutely beautiful. And we'll probably see another large crowd this coming Tuesday. We're having another vigil. Normally our vigils are on the second Tuesday of the month. And so this one last week was just for, as because we felt we needed to do it as a group and as a town. As a reminder, I just want to share our mission statement, which is Watertown Citizens for Black Lives is a community member organization that campaigns against violence and systemic racism in our local community. And so as we continue with this mission, we are no doubt to be joined by more in our community who are really waking up to how systemic racism is a serious issue that needs addressing both in our country and our local community. Our hope is to keep people engaged with ongoing vigils, programs, action items, and educational opportunities aligned with our mission. As I said, we have a vigil coming up once again this coming week. I believe that I've been in contact with some younger folks who are going to be doing a march that will be coming into the square at the same time as our vigil, which is absolutely wonderful. This grouping together of diverse groups. And our monthly meeting, which is now over Zoom like everyone else, is the first Monday of the month, except that in light of recent events, we've actually scheduled another meeting, which will be 2 weeks from tomorrow on June 22nd, if I have the date right. I want to give a big shout out to our steering committee of Arun, Tyler, Eric, and Elizabeth, and myself. Prior to a week ago, we would get maybe 1 or 2 emails a week. We have been fielding dozens of emails a day, and I think I could speak for myself. I'm exhausted, but my gosh, it is absolutely beautiful to see people wanting to get engaged and stay engaged. So if you've written us and you haven't heard back, please give us some patience. We're a little bit overwhelmed, but excited to be in this, excited to be in this together, excited to be in this with you. And a final shout out to all the other folks in the Watertown Citizens for Black Lives who have really shown up over the last few years, and far too many to name, but really just want to appreciate all those as well. So I think the steering committee is actually on the call, all of them. And that's my bit. I don't know if they have anything to add or we need to move on.
I think we're good, but I think everyone is way more aware now of all the work that you guys have been doing, but are doing. And that's a fantastic thing. It's really great. So thanks to all of you again. The last sort of working group is called the Life Friendly Garden Tour. And Henrietta Light has been the founder of that for many, many years. And she had stepped down from the steering committee, but Pam Phillips is going to just give a little update on the garden tour.
Yeah, the garden tour, the goal of the garden tour is to demonstrate how it's possible to have a beautiful garden without using any chemical inputs, no chemical fertilizers or pesticides. And so this really interlaces with the goals of, Friends of Bees, because stopping the use of pesticides is very important for the health of pollinators. And we usually have the tour twice a year. Some years it's only been once. This year we had to cancel the spring tour because of the COVID restrictions. And we're hoping to do a fall tour with reasonable, face coverings and social distancing in place. And at this point, we're just going to see how that works out.
Thank you, Pam.
No,
great. And next, I turn things over to Tony, who has an announcement to make.
Thank you. I have the privilege each year at the annual meeting to ask folks for money. And I'm going to do that just to remind you that this is the only time that Watertown Citizens for Peace, Justice, and the Environment does an appeal. We do an appeal once a year. You should have gotten it in the mail. I do want to say thank you to all those folks who've already replied by mail or through PayPal. We appreciate that support. It is really important that you consider or that you make a contribution to the organization. It doesn't run by itself. It runs by volunteers, but it also needs financial support to do the things that we do, whether it's the mailings, whether it's our coalition work with others, whether it's maintaining our website and our Facebook pages and so forth. It is necessary for us to be support. It is important for us to be supported by you all. Last year was our 40th anniversary, 40 years of Watertown Citizens for Peace, Justice, and the Environment, formerly Watertown for Environmental Safety. So in that year, we urged people to give $40 as the annual contribution. Many people did. This year, we're asking you for $41 as we move from one year to the next. So if you haven't made a contribution, I really wish you would. You can go to our website and at www.watertowncitizens.org and make a contribution there online. If you've got the form that we sent out with the announcement of today's meeting and the the back-to-back listing of all the working groups and all that we have, all the working groups and what they're doing, which I think is quite impressive when you take a look at that insert in your mailing. If you got the form and the return envelope, please take a moment, fill it out, and send it back. If you didn't get a mailing from us, that means we don't have you on the mailing list, which also means that you won't get the announcement of the annual Martin Luther King breakfast, which we support along with the organizers World in Watertown. But we are co-sponsors of that activity, and we use our mailing list to help build that event. So again, if you have not received it in the mail, that means that you're not on our mailing list. I ask that you send your email, your address to watertowncitizens@gmail.com so that we can get you on the mailing list. And again, I reiterate, without your support, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing for the last 41 years. And I ask you to make a contribution online at watertown.org, www.watertown.org. And or if you can do it by mail and you have the form, please fill it out today. Don't wait. Fill it out today and send it to us so that we can continue the work that we're doing. And there are plans for much more work over the next year, which we'll do either by Zoom like this or in person. So please remember Watertown Citizens. This is the organization that has provided the launching pad for many other organizations that continue today. So please give generously, as generously as you can. I do want to say one final thing, and that is in our email, in our mailing list, mailing, in the cover letter, we made a point of asking you to give a portion of what you would have given to us, to give it to either the food bank or to the Watertown Community Foundation. So if you were going to give us $40 or you're going to give us $50, we ask you to consider giving a portion of that, however portion you want, to Watertown Community Foundation or to the Watertown Food Bank. That's what we felt as a steering committee that is important, that we support our local efforts to respond to COVID-19. At the same time, we wanted you to support us. So support us by giving your contribution, but consider giving a portion of what you would give to us to either of those two groups. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. That's great. And now we're moving on to the main portion of this meeting, our candidates forum. And I want to just give some brief introductions to the 5 candidates who are with us and thank them for running or being involved already in our state government and legislature. So David Ciccarelli, who's coming to us from Mozambique, who's been stuck there, not able to get home, is a lifelong resident of Watertown. He and his wife Katrina have 2 boys in the Watertown schools. He graduated from Watertown High and Tulane. He's worked overseas for the last 18 years, and his company performs interior construction on US embassies in over 50 countries. And he mentioned that in his time spent abroad and in New Orleans, that he has witnessed just so much social injustice and oppression and the wars that continue to rage at home and abroad. And he brings that perspective. Thank you for joining us, David, and hope your internet connection holds.
Thank you, Susan.
John Lon. John is our current state rep for the 10th Middlesex District, and he served 3 terms on the Watertown Town Council. And last term, as our state rep, he was the chair of the Joint Committees of Veterans Affairs, and he's currently chairing the Joint Committee on Election Laws. He's a lifelong Watertown resident. He and his wife Shannon have 5 children, and they all attend the Watertown schools. And Allison Leary, who's from Newton. She was elected to the City Council in Newton in 2013, and she currently chairs the council's Public Facilities Committee and is also on the Zoning and Planning Committee. She has also served on the Executive Committee of the Mass chapter of the Sierra Club for a couple of years, as well as on the board of Newton Conservators and the Newton League of Women Voters. And she's currently a program manager for a social services agency serving people with intellectual disabilities. So welcome, Allison. Steve Owens, I think a bunch of us all over the town know Steve. He lives in the East End with his wife Pia and their 2 children who also attend Watertown Public Schools. He's been chair of the Watertown Democratic Town Committee. He began in 2008 until this spring. And in 2016, he was elected to the Democratic State Committee and is a member of that executive committee. Steve's organized a lot of local grassroots operations and campaigned for a lot of progressive candidates: John Hecht, DeVal Patrick, Ed Markey, Elizabeth Warren, and town councilors in Watertown. And as a professional, Steve is a transportation management consultant. And welcome, Steve, and welcome,
Thanks,
Mark.
Ron.
Sure. And Mark Sedaris, longtime resident of Watertown. I think we all have known he served so admirably as our town council president on the town council and for more than 20 years. His wife, Mary Beth, and he have 3 grown children. And he's served as town council president for the last 10 years of his 20 years on the council. He's a member of the school committee and also chairs the school building committee. So welcome, Mark. So on to the meat and potatoes, so to speak, speaking as a vegetarian. But so what I'd like to do is start off. There'll be 1 question from each of the working groups, but 2 questions from each of the working groups. Initially, and I will ask the question first. We'll start with John, and Liz. The Refugee Support Group is going to be the first working group represented, and Liz Goss, who's a member of our group, is going to ask you the first question of the candidates. So you want to start with that first question, and then we'll ask John. In this order: John, then Allison, Mark, Steve, and then David.
Okay, great. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. All right. So first question is for all of you, for John, what's your position on the Massachusetts Safe Communities Act and the Companion Driver's License Bill for undocumented immigrants?
John? Are you there, John? Are you unmuted?
Hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, great. Just before I start, I just want to thank Watertown Citizens group for putting this together, and also to all the candidates who are here today. It's such an important time and to be civically involved, and I appreciate everybody being here today on this call. So I will, though, get right into, I know the time is of the essence. So the Safe Communities Act lead sponsor is a colleague and a friend of mine from Newton, Representative Ruth Balzer. So I'm a co-sponsor of this bill, as with the Mobility Act. So I've been working with Ruth on the Safe Communities Act to bring this important piece of legislation to the floor for a vote. Like any complicated piece of legislation, there takes time to craft and that you work together so that you can work out and get support that will actually pass into law. So specifically on these two bills, what I have done many months ago, last fall, was I reached out also to the police chiefs in my district of Watertown, Waltham, and Newton, and I held a meeting with other legislators in my district, and we talked through some of the issues and challenges that they face and try to work with advocates so that we can come to a bill that everybody can support, because it's very important that we have a bill that has broad support and answers most of those questions and concerns that people have. We had some great discussions. After I met with the police chiefs, I also met with Rep. Balzer back at the State House. We met with advocates. She had met with Attorney Marion Ryan and held another forum. So I feel strongly that this bill is still alive. I've expressed my support again to the Speaker, and that I hope that this bill, both of these bills, come to the floor. The Mobility Act, the Work and Family Mobility Act, is another bill that I do support, part of our meeting with police chiefs. And I think we all kind of realize that right now people are driving. People are driving cars to work. We have a transportation system that is challenging for a lot of our workers who are going to multiple jobs, especially the undocumented community. So there is absolutely a public safety piece of this. We know people are driving. We want them to be insured. We want them to know the rules of the road. And that's very important for overall safety. And I think our police departments, support that, in that they know that this is happening. This is what's going on, and we need to come to a place where we can get as many people insured, as many people on the road that understand the rules to the road. So I support both of those bills, and I'm co-sponsors and working hard to get those to the floor for a vote. So thank you.
Thank you, John. For anyone who's not clear, the Mobility Act would provide driver's licenses for undocumented immigrants, which currently is not the case. Allison, would you like to respond to that question?
I certainly would. And I also am very appreciative of getting a seat at the table to talk about these important issues with Watertown Citizens, Peace, Justice, and the Environment. Very appreciative. I couldn't agree with Representative Ron more. I think it's the Mass Safe Communities Act needs to be passed. I'm disappointed that it still hasn't after some 3 years. I think it's incredibly important that it will ensure that no one's civil rights will be violated and that people do not have to live in fear. And I think it will also restore community trust in our public institutions, including the police, and as well as protect due process. This was one of the reasons why I voted for the City of Newton's Safe Communities Act, which we called Welcoming City, and it had the support of our mayor and our police chief as well. And that passed overwhelmingly in 2017. All Massachusetts residents, anyone who lives in our Commonwealth, should have the right to feel safe and have their civil rights be protected. We don't want to create an air of fear, and we want immigrants to be able to trust the police and be able to come forward when they're being exploited or they need to report a crime. So I think there's an important safety issue to it as well. I support driver's license for undocumented immigrants as well, for many of the same reasons that Representative Long mentioned. I think it's incredibly important that people have the ability to get to and from jobs. Not everybody can take the T. Not everybody can access public transit or bus. And it's important for people to be able to get to doctor's appointments. And it just improves people's quality of life. Why make our hardworking immigrants, why make their lives any more difficult? So I'm fully supportive of both those initiatives, and I hope that the General Court will move more quickly on getting them passed.
Thank you, Allison. Mark.
Thank you. We're not going to see too many differences here so far. I do support the Mass Safe Communities Act, and I feel, as I felt for a long time here, that the state should be taking the lead in creating a policy that everybody can follow through every city and town, so it's consistent, so that every police chief and every other enforcement authority has the tools that it needs, and it doesn't differ from city to city, from street to street. And I do think that, languishing for these years, I think that if I had an opportunity to be sitting on the state legislature, I would be pushing to help any of the sponsors of this bill get this to the floor and get it to a vote. Because I think it's time that we have some consistent policies that are coming right from the state level to the cities and towns that have all created something and crafted different things that, and I think it's much more appropriate that we have something that we can count on from the state. And on the Mobility Act, I do feel, as Representative Lawn just stated, they're out there driving. Undocumented immigrants are out there driving now to their jobs. And a lot of them are working, and they work very hard. And I do think that data will probably show you that a lot of these people would tend not to get involved in certain things because they're afraid they're going to get caught and get in trouble. So I do think that it's time that we take another strong look and move this bill forward as well.
Thank you, Mark. Steve, turn it over to you.
Yes, thanks. Again, I want to echo everybody and say thank you so much to everybody who is on the call, to the members of Watertown Citizens, many of you who I've known for a long time. I really appreciate this opportunity to come out and talk about the issues. So yes, I am in favor of both of these, the Safe Communities Act and driver's licenses, especially now because our local police officers, they have enough on their plate without having to additionally enforce our country's broken immigration laws. That should not be their job. It should not be what they focus their time on, and I think they would agree with me on that. So I'm in favor of the Safe Communities Act. As the chair of the Watertown Democratic Town Committee, I invited speakers who spoke on behalf of both the state and local versions. In Boston, it was the Boston Trust Act, I believe. We had some folks from Cambridge also talk about what they're doing there, because I think it's important that when the state doesn't act, if our local communities can, they should do so, and they should take, that helps push the argument forward at the state level. I also co-sponsored with the Democratic Town Committee, the Watertown Welcomes Immigrants event back in 2007. And I was disappointed that we didn't, Watertown itself didn't do anything on its own. In terms of the driver's license bill, again, the Mass Major City Chiefs of Police Association is in favor of this too, because not just is it a civil rights issue and a fairness issue, but it's a public safety issue, like everybody before me has said. We need to know that everybody on the roads has passed a driving test, has an ID, can get insurance, and frankly, undocumented immigrants are here and they are part of our community. They're people we know, they're our neighbors. We don't ask them for to prove who they are when we interact with them personally. And they're part of our economy. We just can't wish them away. So these are very important pieces of legislation that we need to pass to make sure that they can be fully integrated into our society.
Thank you, Steve. David.
Yes, totally agree with everyone. The Safe Community Act is incredibly important and should be sponsored and supported throughout. As far as the driver's license or the Mobility Act, I agree. It is a safety issue. As I've seen overseas, the rules of the road are different everywhere, and if they can get trained, get the correct support and licensing, it's important because the safety of everybody on the streets. So most important is that the undocumented have a route to become documented. I think that's a bigger issue than everything out there. Is we really have to find a way to support the immigrants in every facet.
All right. Thank you, David. Good point. And at this point, I'm going to stick in the same order for the second question that Liz will ask you all. And then when we move to the next working group, I'll switch the order a bit so we're not always in the same order. Liz, second question from our group.
Yeah, second question is another position question. That Representative David Rogers filed a bill last October to provide medical care for undocumented children who reside in Massachusetts. I think the name of the act is the Act to Ensure Equitable Health Coverage. And, you know, we're asking what's your position on that bill as well.
John.
Great, thank you. And my position is I believe no human being, regardless of immigration status, should ever be denied access to health care. It is important, I think, to also realize that children do not take themselves to the hospital, it's their parents. And we need to support them so they are not afraid to take their child or any sick child to a healthcare professional. So that is my position.
Thank you, John. Allison.
Thank you very much. I see healthcare as a human right, and I think every resident in Massachusetts should have access to high quality healthcare, no matter what your immigration status. I think it's just plain good policy. It's important that we're addressing healthcare issues before they become chronic, debilitating conditions, which of course costs more money in the long run. And healthy children have better outcomes, they do better in school, and they're more likely to become productive members of our community, high functioning adults that contribute to our economic security. So I support healthcare for all at the federal level, and I think it's really, if we cannot take care of the healthcare of all our children that live in the Commonwealth, then I think we need to really reflect what good government is all about. I think that's one of our most critical components is healthcare for everybody.
Thank you, Allison. Mark.
Yes, thank you. I also would support this bill, and I think it's no child should have to go without health insurance, whether they be undocumented or not. No human being should have to go without. And this COVID-19 pandemic has brought this whole healthcare issue to light. And I think it's important that we make sure that everybody has an opportunity to get the help they need when they're sick, or preventive things that they need to do if they want to get inoculated, shots. And I do think so. I think the pandemic that we're in right now has elevated the need for medical care for all.
Thank you, Mark. Steve.
Yeah, Council President Sedaris is absolutely right. We should not punish sick kids for their parents' immigration choices, especially now in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. They're already suffering from worse health outcomes on top of everything else they have to deal with. So I support this bill. I talked to Rep. Rogers about it. I know him from the Democratic State Committee. We both represent Belmont. One of the things he pointed out was that while some of these children are currently covered by the state's children's medical security plan, the coverage is completely inadequate. There's a waiting list. It doesn't cover emergency room services. It doesn't cover inpatient hospital care. Adjusted for inflation, it's about half of what it was 20 years ago. So let's bring these kids in, bring them into Mass Health while we're waiting for action on the federal government for Medicare for all, which I hope that we can, as a country, come into that into a more comprehensive system, because the piecemeal is not working for us, and the COVID-19 epidemic has really shown a spotlight on how inadequate our healthcare system is.
Thank you, Steve. David.
Totally agree with everyone. Children especially, but everybody should have health care taken care of, whether undocumented, documented, whoever. Healthcare is huge. The biggest problem we have is the cost of the healthcare and the distribution of who gets it and who doesn't, and that's what needs to be addressed. But children especially, everybody should be covered. It's not even a question, so I totally support that.
All right, thank you, David. Thanks to all of you. And we're going to move on to the Watertown Faces Climate Change Working Group's questions, our first two questions. And I will ask if Allison, if we can just kind of switch the order, Allison, Mark, Steve, David, and then John. And I think, is it Rick Kalish who's
Yes.
going to ask these questions? Okay, Rick, welcome, and thank you for asking the questions.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all of the candidates. House Bill 3983, the Roadmap to a Clean and Thriving Commonwealth Bill, and other House bills include the goal of net zero greenhouse gas emissions by the year 2050. How would you ensure that this goal is incorporated into all COVID-19 economic recovery efforts, including one or more of the following issues: affordable housing, transportation, public health, education, and equity?
Thank you very much. I could go on this issue for a long time. It's something that's very dear to my heart. It's actually how I first ran for office, is because climate change was keeping me up at night. I had 2 small children, and I didn't see much happening at either the state or federal level. I think we need to pass this bill, House Bill 3983, immediately. The CLF, the Conservation Law Foundation, has laws it as the single most important piece of legislation pending in the Commonwealth. And it's a really important update to the Global Warming Solutions Act, which we're not on track to meet. It's really important that we need to be carbon neutral by 2050, not 80%, which is the Global Warming Solution Act does. How do we get there? Well, it takes multiple pathways, including specifically dealing with transportation and transforming our energy, our energy sector as well. We need to also, as we're working towards this change, we have to think about how the impacts would be on our workers, training. Climate change effectively means that we need to do things differently, and that we need to be much more efficient with the resources that we have, because the life that, the type of life that we're living is just not sustainable. Regarding housing, that was your first thing about housing. I'm a big advocate of affordable housing in areas where people are not so dependent on autos, where they have access to amenities, where they can walk, where they can take transit. For me, it's really about giving every opportunity to reduce vehicle trips so everybody doesn't have to get into their car. And reducing vehicle trips has shown to be significant in reducing congestion, which we all get a lot of complaints about until most recently. And I have to say, the sudden clearing of the roads as people are staying home has made me realize how much of our public space we dedicate to motor vehicles. And I think we need to rethink that as well. When we build housing, it has to be passive house design and very close to it. I support the electrification of buildings. As a matter of fact, as the chair of public facilities, we are looking at an ordinance that would do just that. And we actually got some good news from the Attorney General's office recently regarding our ability to move forward as a city on making sure that more, as we're building buildings, we're not just continuing to use fossil fuels. So I also think some of the other ways that we could address it, change the Department of Public Utilities to prioritize safety. Currently, their mission statement says nothing about delivering a safe product. Its priority is to deliver a product at the lowest possible price. There's no mention of safety, security, fairness, or climate change on that. I think we need to fully fund the Mass Clean Energy Center. This is a crucial agency that provides information and resources to allow cities and towns to work on accelerating the clean energy sector. It helps spur job creation, economic growth, while helping cities and towns adopt clean energy programs. Yet this body needs a rescue every year. It's not fully funded by the general court, and I think that needs to change. Let me see what else. This was a more complicated question. I think one other thing that I was involved in is state has a building code, and the building code is usually voted the same way every year. This year, I was able to participate as a city councilor to make changes to the building code that ensures much more efficiency, that makes changes to how we build. Transportation is one of the biggest sectors of greenhouse gas emissions, but heating and cooling buildings is another. As a city councilor, whenever we work on a special permit, we are working on ways to disconnect parking from the housing unit, which has the effect so that it actually makes the housing unit more inexpensive. Watertown did a great, as was mentioned, you are requiring solar on buildings of a certain size. We're going to be following suit on that. There has to be good policies in place that incentivizes our transition to a renewable energy, encourages people to find alternatives to driving, it improves our transportation system. And I have a very strong track record on this, as I mentioned. As recently, I attended the Sustainable Middlesex group in Winchester, which is a local organization working on multiple local groups that work on climate change. I've been so impressed by the grassroots effort on climate change and our young people pushing for more change. So I think it's important as a state representative to participate in these forums, in these local trainings, and work closely with experts to craft bills that are critical to reaching our climate goals. And currently the general court is well behind the 8 ball on this, and we have very little time left to address climate change. So those are just some of the things that I have been working on, and I will let others speak as well. I'm happy to take additional questions later on.
Later, yeah. Thank you, Allison. Mark.
Thank you. This is a great question for me because I have a strong record on policies that have to do with climate change. And if I were a state representative, I would be pushing my values, which are to get this bill passed to accomplish the goals of having net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. You know, we talk about how these things incorporate into what we're doing today. I mean, someone mentioned earlier a couple of things. I'm the chair of the school building committee in Watertown. And because of some of my advocacy, we're going to be the first 2 schools in Massachusetts, 2 elementary schools that are going to be net zero. And we got I got an email the other day from the architect who said that we have more than met our solar needs. We may actually have solar that we will have either extra or be able to use towards the to make sure that both of these schools are net zero. I also supported many times affordable housing issues, and we went from 10% to 12.5% to 15% in Watertown. These are issues also that I think should be taken up at the state level to create some more ways for affordable housing. On transportation, 4 or 6 years ago, I having campaigned through the community and talk about the transportation issues, I created a subcommittee on transportation, and they were looking into transportation matters in Watertown and across the area to be able to try to get a shuttle program going. Education is a huge part of this, and again, I'm going to point to COVID-19 and look at the changes that had to be made in education to go to a remote learning situation. And we also have to be able to teach these children that part of their learning and part of how they're going to grow up is how they can contribute to make sure that we are all on the same page and how we continue to reduce our carbon footprint. And so I think that given all of the facts, and you can look up all of the votes I've taken, I think if my values or our values collectively are that we want to get this done, then there shouldn't be a roadblock. We should be working tirelessly to get this in front of the legislature for a vote and get it over with.
Thank you, Mark. Steve, you'll be next. I just wanted to clarify in case everyone here wasn't aware. So John Lon and Allison Leary are both running as candidates for the 10th Middlesex district, and Mark, Steve, and David are running for 29th Middlesex, and both of those include Watertown. Steve.
Okay, yeah, great, thank you. So I'm going to come at this a little bit different. First of all, the bill itself, and the goal of coming to net zero by 2050, 100% on board. We should pass this, and we probably would have passed it not for COVID. I think we're going to talk about that a little bit later. The main thing about this makes this important is it has goals that we need to meet in the interim. If we don't meet those interim goals, we'll never meet the end goal. And that's what happened with the previous version is we're not set up to meet the goals we set, years ago. But in terms of climate change, I think what's important is that we need to make sure that everything that we do going forward has a climate change lens that we can view it through, right? We can't just have housing policy, we need climate housing policy. We can't just have a transportation policy, we need climate transportation policy, because housing policy is climate policy, is transportation policy, is social justice policy. Because we need to make sure that when we are, that there's an environmental justice component to our recovery effort that we're going through for COVID. We've seen communities like Chelsea and Brockton, and they've been breathing dirty air for decades now. And now what? They have worse COVID health outcomes due to a higher prevalence of asthma and other health problems that make COVID worse. So we really need to build a green economic recovery, not just for them, but for all of us. So what does that mean? That means no bailouts or tax incentives for high carbon industries just to boost the job numbers. That means we need to move forward with clean, reliable, electrified public transportation that people can feel safe taking, so that our vehicle emissions don't explode once people start getting back on the roads. We need to make solar more accessible, and I commend the town council president and the town council for being really great solar advocates over the past few years. It's been a real bright spot, but we need to make sure that those are accessible to low-income communities by changing the incentive structure. Put people to work installing solar panels, removing net metering, things like that. Back in the last recession, we did not make climate a priority. And what happened? Carbon emissions bounced back up bigger than ever after the recovery. And we can't make that mistake. And as we heard earlier, we have the most carbon in the atmosphere despite 3 months of being trapped in our homes. So we don't have time to make that same mistake again. It's the most urgent problem that we are facing, and every single policy that we go through needs to be viewed through a climate lens if we're going to be successful, if we're going to have any chance of giving our children a environment that we can recognize without dangerous storms and high sea levels and surges and things like that. So this is really the most important thing I think that we're going to be talking about today.
Thank you, Steve. David.
Yes, Steve, that was great. I totally agree. It's not something that you just talk about once or something almost like Black Lives Matter now. We are not just going to do it for spur of the moment. Every time it comes up, you have to address it. So any bill or anything that comes up construction-wise for public housing or anything, we need LEED certified buildings like Watertown schools. This is great. It should be a trendsetter for the rest of the state. Public transportation, electrifying it and encouraging people to use it and making it more efficient is what we really need to do. Get the cars off the road. Roofs, green roofs, construction in general should be definitely efficient, energy efficient, whether it's green roofs, LEDs, LED lighting, anything. As far as educating, we definitely need, I've got 2 young boys. We've got to start them young, realizing what they're getting into, and we've got to have the responsibility to take care of these kids. We can't leave them in a world of hell. We've got to take care of them. We've got to start and be responsible and then teach them to be responsible as well.
All right. Thank you, David. John.
Thank you. The House Bill 3983 is a bill filed by Rep. Machina, which is basically the overview of it requires the Executive Office of Environmental Affairs to create this roadmap to get to a net zero emissions by 2050. The House Ways and Means is currently reviewing this legislation. I did check in on it the other day and spoke with the House Ways and Means chairman as I worked on the election reform bill that was just passed for COVID-19. And I was glad to hear that Speaker DeLeo's announcement in January 2020 that the House is committed to accomplishing and to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. Even at the onset of COVID-19, Speaker DeLeo identified climate change again as a key priority. And it looks like our session will be extended, that we will continue through the fall, regardless of an election year, to complete the important work that we have to do, especially on climate change. So I'm very happy and supportive of that. We also recognize we've lost over 17,000 jobs in the green economy over March and April. So we're going to have to come back with a way to fight back on climate change that's going to help these workers get back into the workforce. I'd also like to say one of the reasons, actually the issue that I got involved in politics here in Watertown when I ran for city council was about the building of our new police station. And I would also like to applaud Council President Mark Sedaris. And regardless of any race that's going on, I don't know one citizen of Watertown who's dedicated more of his life to better our community. He sits on the town council, the school committee. He has sat with on the police station building committee, and with all of the building that we're going to do for our new schools. He's such a vital and important piece of our community. And we both sat on the police station building committee. I was the chairman. It was a $15 million project. And this was back in 2008, and we worked with the Green Roundtable. We did geothermal heating, photovoltaic roofs, waterless urinals. We did so many green technology that was before green technology was really coming into its own. So those are efforts that have been made. I think really in transportation, I'd just like to point out one thing. I filed a bill this year to have the car rental business was exploiting a tax loophole. And I filed a bill that would require car rental businesses to pay a sales tax when they buy cars. So currently, the car rental business has enjoyed a tax loophole that has been costing the taxpayers of Massachusetts hundreds of millions of dollars a year. I filed a bill, it was accepted, it was put into the transportation financing plan. In a nutshell, what it does is when car rental business buy a fleet of cars, they do not pay a sales tax. When they then use those cars, depreciate its value, make a profit on it, and then sell it. And when they sell it, the Commonwealth loses that depreciated value of the car. So then the next person who buys that car at a lower price, then the sales tax is paid. So I filed this legislation to end that. It was accepted. I got a lot of blowback from the car rental business, but I stood my ground, and it's something that, then COVID-19 hit. So certainly I know we're going to look back at all our revenues that we're going to have to do, but that is something that I have done and accomplished in the State House, and I think it's a very important thing for transportation going forward. I also, we have included the House this past December, and we added $54 million to make available for electric car rebates over the next 2 years. We did that in a supplemental budget, and it was signed into law last year. Electric vehicles do play a huge role in decreasing emissions. So I'm proud of that work. We have a lot of work to do on climate change, and I'm happy to work with everyone going forward on this. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And at this point, some of you have actually already touched on a little bit of strategies that you might take, but the second question is even more specific. So Rick, if you would give us that second question.
Yes, thank you again to all of the candidates. House leadership has not embraced a crisis view of climate change. What strategy or approach would you take to work with leadership to achieve a more robust response?
Okay, so I'm up, right?
Yes, Allison, go ahead.
I think the House leadership seems to be the major barrier to a lot of effective, important legislation getting through the House. So developing a relationship with House leadership is important. Working with colleagues. Politics is about working together and finding areas of agreement. That's been my mantra as a city councilor. It has allowed me to be very effective in passing legislation, including reducing our plastic waste, getting rid of plastic bags. There's a number of things that I've been effective on here in Newton, and I want to be able to bring that ability to collaborate and work together at the State House. I also am very concerned about the lack of transparency in the State House. I think every legislator their vote should be made publicly available. I think it's important that every resident knows exactly how their state representative has voted. That will also help bring things to the forefront. And also, I was very impressed with the last freshman group of legislators that came into the State House. It included many legislators, first time getting involved with the state politics, many younger legislators, many women, maybe many immigrants, most of them all with very progressive policies that I really agree with. I think it's important that we continue to build and elect to state office candidates who share the commitment of our communities and of folks on the Watertown Citizens, Peace and Justice. We need to get that critical extra effort to make sure that we have the power to actually challenge leadership and get them. You know, many good bills never see the light of day. They never get out of committee, or they go to study. We need to be able to move those forward. And I think it's important to elect folks like myself who've made this a commitment, who have worked most of their lives, and all their elected effort has gone into this effort. Whether it's Black Lives Matter, whether it's climate change, what I think is the most important threat to our way of life. We need to act now, and we need to have results. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Mark.
Thank you.
Strategy.
Yes, on the first strategy that I would use is a strategy that I've been using all of my public life. And that's to start talking to people and start trying to gather, making some coalitions and working together, working with data and providing the reasons why we should be working towards like that, and having conversations with leadership and people that are below the leadership that may be hesitant to do something. Having these conversations, I think, will go a long way to convince people that this is a major issue. It's a major problem, it's a major challenge, and we need to do something about it. I think that data will support that, and I'm sure there's, as Representative Lon has stated, the speaker is now starting to move in this direction, but I would be more than doing what I would do as I always do, and try to bring people together, have a conversation, and give them the information and give them the tools they need so that this could be moved forward.
Thank you, Mark. Steve.
Yeah, thank you. So again, yes, we are in a climate crisis and we need to move fast. The leadership has maybe not been moving as fast as we would like. I will say, the Senate passed their climate bill, and that was the bill that called for net zero in 2050. They passed it. And after that happened, the speaker and the governor both said that they support that those same benchmarks and with the flexibility that the Senate bill provided. So, let's hold them up to that. As members of the public, as a legislator, as an activist, we need to make sure that, yeah, hey, you said this is what you want. Now it's time. Now it's time to deliver on that. And I think if not for COVID, we would be talking about that, and we would be talking about the House version of that bill right now, and not talking about trying to to get to, trying to get to a new normal. We would be talking about climate, and we'd also be talking about transportation, which the House did pass, and I commend Representative Lawn on that. So, that would have increased gas taxes. It would have given funds to the MBTA. That was not an easy vote for a lot of members to take, I know. But that would have, climate policy is transportation policy as well. So, things have been moving forward. We need to move faster. And how I would work with leadership is, again, how I work with everybody. I work with activists from all over, and I've worked with candidates from across the Democratic spectrum. So most of the House colleagues are going to be Democrats. They just lost another Republican. I have relationships with many current members of the legislature and many members of activist coalitions. And I believe that I have a perspective that can bring both of those together. It's important to bring business leaders together as well. And I think that that's how you get things done, is you get everybody to work towards a goal and slowly make progress towards the end.
Thank you, Steve. David.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that everybody's not all on the same page, but that's the job, like Allison said. The job of politics is politic, and you've got to get everybody to, or as many people as you can, to agree with you, and it's a little give and take. It can't be me versus you and you versus me. We all have to come to some kind of agreement, and I don't think there's much disagreement that climate change is a very big issue, and I think we can all get on board with that. The other thing that needs to be done is individual communities and businesses need to file resolutions and make themselves as active too. So like Mark said, the data's there to encourage people that, hey, we're all in this together. The town wants it, we want it, the state wants it, and it becomes more, less transparent.
All right, thank you, David. John, your ideas, strategy, approach. John, you there?
Yes, I'm here, sorry.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, and I'm happy to answer the question. So I would like to say right now that I am in House leadership, and I am happy that, as I said earlier, that Speaker DeLeo has committed to getting all of our House colleagues to getting 2050 with a net zero goal. I will say, since I've been in the House of Representatives, we've done many things, and we've continued to build on its commitment to the environment and green energy. In 2016, we passed the Solar Act. In 2016, an Energy Diversity Act. In 2018, Advanced Cleaning Act, which establishes an energy storage for a target of offshore wind and authorizes 1,600 more megawatts for, as I said, offshore wind. An environmental bond bill. We also, continue to just stress, and as I said, that the legislature is committed to extend session this year and pass this climate change. Having me in the State House is very important, I think, to lead this charge. And I'd also like to talk on the transparency. It's not an issue I will run away from because I'm happy to talk about it. So I think my opponent's talking about bills in committee that sometimes we have electronic polls. Sometimes the committee rules will allow for each representative to answer to their constituents about any votes that are taken. So I do want to point out, this is something that comes up. I think the State House has made many more transparent policies. I authored a OCPF bill, the Office of Campaign and Finance, to disclose more campaign finance more regularly from state reps and senators. But polls, electronic polls sometimes go out for committees. So for example, my committee has over 100 bills. When we have to take internal polls on whether we want bills to advance or not, those are public. You can get those information. And the best way to get that information is to ask your representative. If you want to know how they voted on something, we're not talking about floor votes. They're obviously public. And I released a poll last week from the Election Laws Committee, what our for the new COVID-19 bill that was just passed. So my opponents keep bringing this up, but in my 9 years in the legislature, my opponent has never once asked me how I voted for a bill on committee. So if it was that important, I think they would ask, and you should have that right, and you should do that if you're interested in it. It shouldn't be just a campaign slogan. It should be something that you're really committed to because you're interested in it. And you've never once asked what my position was on a bill in committee.
Thank you, John. Interesting point. And we're going to move on now to Watertown Citizens for Black Lives questions. And in order, we'll start with Mark, Steve, David, John, and then Allison. And Joseph will ask these questions.
Well, and thank you. And thank you to all the candidates for being here and answering our questions. The first question from our group is, what do you see as the biggest challenges facing communities of color in Watertown, and how will you address these challenges? Thank you.
Thank you. I want to talk about recently, husband and wife came to the school committee, and the wife got up at the public forum part of the school committee meeting to talk about her daughter's challenges because they were in a mixed racial marriage and how she got, I'm going to say, verbally abused by some children in the classroom. And then we saw her husband get up, who was a man of color, who also laid out his own challenges in this community. And when you sit and listen to those types of things, you start to think about, and again, given what's gone on now with the police brutality and the horrible issues from last week, you know, this now starts, you have to think about what are we doing at the local level. I think one of the things that's come out of this is there is now an anti-bias coalition started by the schools, and a number of people are involved, including this police department. And I think what we need to do on a local level is continue to have these types of groups getting together and teaching, and it's part of the education process. And I think it needs to start at a very young age, teaching these young children that color and race don't matter. They're just like you and me. They're human beings. And I think we need to do a better job of that. We can expand on programs like the Anti-Bias Coalition. And, you know, I know other groups in town have done similar things, but I do think we can expand upon that. And we should probably find a way, and I know to a certain extent, one of the things that Councilor Palumbo worked on for a long, long time was a social service coordinator, where people go to these, where she can coordinate certain things. I think we may need to look at creating some type of a budget line item to help further this education that we need to do for the children, starting at a young age and working all the way to the adults to make sure that the adults are all on the same page.
Thank you, Mark. Steve.
Thank you. So first of all, I want to just say that, you know, like everybody, I was outraged, saddened, just completely wrecked by the recent senseless murders of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor, and the list goes on and on and on for just too long. You know, my family and I, we came out to the Watertown Square Vigil on Tuesday. We were out in Cambridge yesterday by Alewife, just to show everybody that Black Lives Matter. While this doesn't make up for the tragedy, but I think we talked about this in the beginning of the meeting, the response was overwhelmingly positive from not just the crowds who showed up with the signs, but also the passersby honking their horns, you know, in a way that I don't think would have happened years ago. So, you know, that at least made me hopeful that we get some kind of, you know, lasting policy change to fight, you know, systemic racism in our society. And that's something that we need to really come to grips with, because, you know, it's easy to say you know, when there's a swastika in the middle school bathroom. You know, it's easy to say that's wrong. We shouldn't do it, and you know, we need to address that. But systemic racism is more insidious, and it can happen because the system is set up. Even if people of goodwill, people who don't think of themselves as being biased in any way, and probably aren't. But the system is set up wrong. You get bad results from it. And I'll say that Watertown is getting increasingly diverse. It's more diverse than when I was here. It's probably more diverse than, you know, as every year it gets more diverse. There's 35 languages that get taught or that get spoken at home from schools. But the town's political and civic and administration is still overwhelmingly white, and the school administration and the teaching staff is still overwhelmingly white. And people are trying. It's not because people aren't trying. The anti-bias coalition, the Kingian nonviolence training, these are all good things, and we're doing very, very good things, but we're not getting the representation that our students in our town really, you know, should have. And so that's an ongoing issue. The representation in civic life, I think, is very important. And partly it's because it is really important, not just for young people to see, you know, people of color in positions of authority, but for everybody. So it's not necessarily just a problem with the schools, but, you know, also up and down our society. We're no different than, you know, than a lot of towns in Massachusetts. We have good people who are doing good work, and the police are doing a great job. Chief Lawn was very much appreciated his presence at the vigil, and his words and his policy and his statement. I think everybody is pointed in the right direction, but, you know, there are still issues that people of color in this community feel, and, you know, we feel it in our family as well. So I'll just leave it there.
Thank you, Steve. David.
We've been fortunate here in Watertown. We do have a great police force, great police chief, and we've been an incredibly diverse community. And the biggest thing we have to do is to keep our foot on the pedal on this movement that's going on. It can't just happen every time something bad happens. It has to maintain throughout until a real change happens. Legislation and whatnot. Educating children, especially the young ones, they don't know there's a problem. It's our fault as the adults and the teachers and the people the kids look up to, that we've put racism into their minds, and that's what has to change. And I think if we start educating, and they can learn the difference between good and bad. So I think it has to become a part of a policy that part of their education does include training or education on racism. So I think something needs to be put into law where the school system has a certain part of their curriculum to include tolerance training, whether it's Black or religious or any kind of tolerance. I think we need to really step up on this, because it's ridiculous how some people get treated.
Thank you, David. John.
Hi. Thank you. I just wanted to comment. Since we received this questionnaire from Watertown Citizens, we have seen one of the biggest movements in decades in our country. As many of you know, as I was commenting earlier, I was chairman of election laws, and I was charged to draft legislation under a tight timeline to provide Massachusetts with options on how their voices to be heard. And this is what we also need to be aware of here. We need to make sure we are listening and allowing the voices to be heard of the Black community. I was at the peaceful protest on Sunday night. I left my State House office at 8:15. I walked in front of the State House. It was peaceful. People just protesting. Many doctors and nurses had walked up to Mass General Hospital. At 8:15, I left and headed home. And by the time I made it home, the place in Boston had turned into a very chaotic and scary scene. It was all of us who were here on this call, all of us in this country now know we really need to do more. We need to listen. This Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter, when it's being communicated, I really think we got to take a step back and just the people who are saying All Lives Matter, and I have said it in the past, is we're not maybe missing the point, and that is that until all Black lives matter, then all lives will matter. So that is the point. We need to make sure that all Black lives matter, then all lives will matter. So we need to just keep educating. We need to keep working with our minorities communities and keep working with our police to have a safer community, and that is built through trust and communication. So I hope to work on that and these injustices.
Thank you, John. Allison.
Yes, Madam Chair, a couple of process questions. One is, would I be able to get a chance to respond to my opponent later, or can I respond now? And the other one is, I just want to make sure that we're answering the questions in order, because I see that you have the Black Lives Matter question is the third. So there's going to be a total of 3 questions that were being asked regarding Watertown for Black Lives, right?
The plan was we gave everyone an opportunity to submit 3 questions to all of you, knowing that we want to be careful about time constraints. And so we each group prioritized the first 2 questions. And yes, if we have time, we were planning to get to the 3rd question. I know John, was talking a little bit about that 3rd question. So yeah, if people could try to focus on the particular question that's being asked, just the challenges facing communities of color in Watertown, that particular question. But yes, I understand, John, kind of integrating it together.
And my process question, may I respond to my opponent now regarding his last comments, or should I wait till the end to leave it time for
I think it's fine if you want to do that now, if we can just keep it as much as possible to just 1 minute.
Sure. I certainly have asked my opponent how he was voted. As a matter of fact, I had met with him over the years, and I actually made an effort to go into the State House, make an appointment, and be at his office. And he did not meet with me. He was not there. He blew me off, and we never were able to reschedule. I don't find him available. He's not in Newton. And I have Ruth Balser and KCON on speed dial. That's where I'm able to get more information more quickly. And the onus should not be on the voter. The onus should be on the state representative to make sure that people know their positions and how they vote. And in this day and age of good communication and many ways to get the word out, there is I feel no reason why we don't know why our representatives vote on important issues of the day. Regarding getting back to the Watertown for Black Lives, I think the biggest challenges facing communities of color in Watertown is what many people face, especially people who are lower incomes, and that's affordable housing, economic opportunity, and access to affordable health care. I mean, I support the governor's housing bill. Actually would reduce I'm jumping ahead of myself. Zoning is one area where I think we really need to make changes in our communities to make it easier to build multifamily and affordable housing. And the governor does have a housing choice bill, which would reduce the votes needed to make zoning changes in communities from to a simple majority rather than a super majority that it is now. I will tell you, this is probably the biggest barrier in Newton for us to not build more affordable housing. I think it is so important that the Black community, our communities of color, immigrant communities have ways to integrate into the fabric of communities. And one thing I think is really important is to be involved in police-sponsored community events. We had a Kids and Cops basketball game in Nonantum. We have a group of parents that have worked to meet regularly with the chief of police regarding their youth. One of our school committee members, a Black woman, told me about her son who didn't want to walk to the Newton Corner Y anymore. And when she asked, he didn't want to walk because he kept getting stopped by the Newton police, asking him, "Son, where are you going? Where do you live?" So he asked his mother to drive him. And she has a friend, a Black woman, who regularly drives a road in Newton. She has been stopped 4 times by 4 different Newton police officers. And to, you know, for various things. I think it's important that our police chiefs and police organizations work with communities of color to develop relationships so that they're known, the police know them, that they feel safe discussing with the police issues that come up. I think the more opportunities that we give folks, and it comes down to communication, empathy, and local organizations like yourselves do a lot of excellent work. So that's why those are some of the, I think those local efforts are really critically important. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. I think you also kind of pulling in the stuff about the second question, but I'm going to turn it to Joseph to present that question specifically to everyone, starting with Mark.
Great, thank you. So the second question, how will you address the disproportionate impact of housing security on families and communities of color?
As has been stated by some of the other candidates here, you know, affordable housing is the first challenge. And how do we get there? Do we need to continue to look at changing our policies? We have some cities and towns have a community choice preference policy on their housing. I think maybe we need to look at a minority choice preference, which would somehow maybe change the opportunities that are afforded to people of color and families of color. Or maybe we need to look at policies that would be more friendly to, in particular, family choice. So I think there are a number of ways we could look at this differently than we've been looking at it, because the continued ways that we look at it today don't seem to be working as well as they should. And that's, you know, a personal opinion, and I think we can do better in this area. And I think we need to look at a couple of different ways, as I've just stated, and maybe change some of the preferences.
Thank you, Mark. As we move forward to Steve and the others, given our timing, we had started off ahead, but we're likely to get behind, and I feel like we're risking not getting to some of these questions. So I'm going to ask everyone to please try and shorten your answers, and even like 30 seconds, between 30 seconds and a minute, if you can possibly do that, that would be really helpful.
So I'm not sure I can solve affordable housing in 30 seconds, but I'll give it my best try. But seriously, you know, housing equity is critical. We have to keep in mind that, you know, even though I only have 30 seconds, it took us decades and decades of bad discriminatory housing policy, from redlining to racial disparities in the implementation of the GI Bill to exclusionary zoning. I mean, this is a long, long process that we have to unwind. So there's no quick fix, but there's a couple things that we can do and just help people stay in their homes immediately. You know, making sure that once the eviction and foreclosure moratorium ends, that people who have been impacted by COVID have help if they've missed their rent or their mortgage payments. We need to develop high quality affordable housing. We need just cause eviction reform. We need to protect tenants from having their homes foreclosed out from under them, and then now they have no place to live. And I think we should be sealing eviction records after 3 years, so tenants can get out from under the stigma of having been evicted, which can snowball, and one bad mark and means that you are housing insecure for the rest of the decade, the rest of 20 years, the rest of your life. These are things that we can fix around the edges, but it's going to take a lot of work to make sure that we have full housing equity.
Thank you, Steve. David.
Yeah, I don't know how to solve the problem. I'm going to admit that. I think affordable housing percentages need to go up. So places like Watertown that have a great housing market will still allow people who can't afford to live there. So I think percentages need to go up. I think grants or low income, low percentage, low interest loans for those who need it is important as well. Trust me, I almost can't afford to live in the town, and it's hard. So something needs to be done. I'm not sure what, but we have to look into it. I think, those are the couple of things I can think of: low income, low interest loans, as well as percentage of new construction to allow for affordable housing. Two of the bigger ideas that I can think of.
Okay, thank you, David. John, housing insecurity.
Yes. Well, I'd like to first start that I have actually taken action to provide more opportunities to expand public housing in my community and my district. And I believe, and I know all of you on this call today do understand that housing costs are at a crisis level. We all understand as government and concerned citizens, we have to do more. For example, I work closely with my 3 public housing directors of Watertown, Newton, and Waltham to find solutions for affordable housing. And I believe one of the best answers in the short term is that we need, and we haven't expanded our public housing stock. Because I think we all realize as well that affordable housing and options in private development is not affordable. Many of these units are $1,600, $1,800, and for the working poor, they're just not affordable. So this does not provide help to people at the bottom income level. So what I did last year in the state budget is I got $50,000 allocated to the Watertown Public Housing Authority. And I have been working to develop plans with Michael Lauer and the Housing Authority to expand on the current land that we own in Watertown. It is being done in my district in Newton, and I'm also working in Waltham on this issue, is try to look at plans to develop. One of the biggest challenges we have is the cost of land. So the land that we currently own, we need to look at all the options that we can to expand on that current land. I also, one of the big issues that's going on is what we're trying to do is build more 1-bedroom units, because we have a big issue in public housing. It's called overhousing, where families grew up and it served them 2-3 bedrooms. They raised their children. The parents now could be retired or seniors, but they're still in 2- and 3-bedroom units. What we need to do is have options for those people to move from a 2-3 bedroom unit that served their family well, and have them transition into a 1-bedroom unit so that we can free up more housing options. And this will help all people of color and all families that are in desperate need of housing options. Thank you.
Thank you for those ideas, John. Ellison.
Yes, thank you very much. So I did touch on some of my ideas for increasing housing stock. As a city councilor in Newton, I have voted for all our affordable housing developments: Northland, Austin Street, Washington Place, Riverdale, which is being approved imminently, will be imminently approved by the ZBA. It's a 40B. That's going to include a 3-bedroom at 50% area median income. I think also I want to stress that housing, sustainability, and transportation go hand in hand, and it's really important that we realize that housing equity, economic justice works really well with our climate goals. And we also, with passive house and extra housing units that are really efficient, we're also reducing the costs of housing costs for the residents there as well. And I know you wanted to make this really quick, touching on housing vouchers. For folks that are very low income, it is very difficult for communities to afford enough subsidies. Mr. Lon is totally correct on that. I think that's partly something the state could work on, and certainly the federal government could do more to get more housing vouchers for the very low income people that live in public housing stock. And the reason why housing is expensive is because we haven't built enough of it over the last 30 or 40 years, and that needs to change.
Thank you, Allison. All right, jumping ahead, peace and security issues. In this order, starting Steve, David, John, Allison, and Mark. Jean, could you ask that first question, please?
Jean has lost contact with everybody with the whole shooting match here. So she's asked me to fill her in. I was just on the phone with her. I don't know what's wrong with her system, but she's lost. So I'll start. 28% of Massachusetts state budget is provided by the federal government, which can use progressive taxation to fund major priorities that are hard for Massachusetts to afford, like fixing the MBTA, converting to clean energy systems, and providing sufficient housing for all. Yet Congress spends 55% of the federal discretionary dollars on the military. The question is, should the Massachusetts legislature call for Congress to pass a people's budget to reorient these priorities and assist Massachusetts and other states?
Hey, Steve.
So yes, I think it's appropriate to look at military budget funding. You know, military budget in fiscal year 2020 was over $700 billion. So just 1% of that would wipe out the COVID deficit that Massachusetts is facing. So I think it's fair to ask if our priorities are in the right place. You know, if you just look at what's happening right now, this past week, you know, we have military hardware deployed on the streets. We have a president who is invoking a 200-year-old law